Good morning. I'm going to open the staff hearing officer meeting of February 7th, 2024. First, we'll start with preliminary matters. Any requests for continuances, withdrawals, postponements, or addition of ex agenda items. I do not have anything to share in that regard. Moving on to item B is an announcement about 129 Las Ondas. This is an announcement of the staff hearing officer decision of a coastal development permit to allow a proposed development at 129 Las Ondas in the non-appealable jurisdiction of the city's coastal zone. The project consists of a 6,098 square foot parcel developed with a 1,320 square foot one-story residence and an attached 228 square foot garage. The proposed project consists of an additional 675 square feet for an attached accessory dwelling unit at the rear of the house. The resultant 2,223 square feet is 82% of the maximum allowed floor to lot area ratio. And I just want to share that I went out on site, I read the staff report. This is only an announcement. There is no public hearing on this item. Based on government code regulations, and I can take written correspondence, but I did not receive any written correspondence for this particular item. And I can share that I agree with staff's assessment in approving the coastal development permit as drafted in the staff report with the conditions that are also included. And this is the final action of a city. All right, that's for that one. Now, moving on to, I will open up public comment for items not on today's agenda. If there's anyone in the audience who wishes to speak on items not on today's agenda, or anyone attending via Zoom. Ms. Gu, do we have anybody who wishes to speak?
I'm checking Zoom. I do not see any raised hands.
Okay. I don't see anyone in the audience moving to speak, so I'm going to go ahead and close general public comment, and then move on to a consent item for 923 Castillo Street. This is a request for a one-year time extension for the tentative subdivision map approved by the Planning Commission on February 13th, 2020. The approved map was set to expire on February 13th, 2024, and a one-year time extension was granted on February 22nd, 2023. The applicant is requesting a second time extension until February 13th, 2025. And the approved project consists of the construction of 3 two-bedroom condo units with 7 on-grade parking spaces on a vacant 9,040 square foot lot adjacent to Mission Creek. The proposed 3-unit condominium project would be 14.5 dwelling units per acre, which is consistent with the RM zone and with the general plan designation of medium-high density residential. The discretionary application approved for this project was a tentative subdivision map for a one-lot subdivision to create 3 residential condominium units. And I can just say, well, first I'm going to, we have staff here, but there's really not going to be a formal presentation as part of this, but I am going to open up public comment. If anybody in the audience wishes to speak on 923 Castillo Street, this consent item, please let us know. Ms. Gu, do we have anyone attending via Zoom who wishes to speak on this item?
On checking Zoom, I do not see any raised hands.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close public comment, and I don't see anyone in the audience wishing to speak. So public comment is closed for this. Again, I've read the staff report. This particular request for a one-year time extension, it's, this applicant, the plans still comply. It still meets everything that was approved prior, and I agree with staff's recommendation that, again, this project continues to conform with the zoning code and all building ordinances and policies of the general plan, and this applicant has been making the effort to continue to try to obtain a building permit for the project. So I am approving this one-year time extension to February 13th, 2025. And just note that this item, because I approved it, there is no appeal for an approval of a time extension. So let's keep moving along. Item 3 is the continued item for 711 Bass Street. Let me go to hang on. Okay, so this is an 8,995 square foot site. It's currently developed with 2 one-story residential units and a detached single-car garage. The project consists of converting the front 815 square foot residence, Unit 1, to a short-term rental or hotel use. The project would also address miscellaneous violations identified in ENF 2023-00142, comprised of but not limited to plumbing, piping, electrical, installation of a water heater, and conversion of the garage to a laundry room without a permit. And the garage is proposed to be returned to its original permitted condition. And the discretionary application under the jurisdiction of the staff hearing officer at this hearing is an interior setback modification to allow for a change of use within the required 6-foot side yard setback. I've already mentioned this, and this is a continued project. The project does qualify for, an exemption under further environmental review under section 15303, which allows for the conversion of existing small structures from yet one use to another where only minor modifications are made in the exterior of the structure. We have Ms. Plummer here today. If there's anything, I will get to that. But I can also invite the applicant up. Hang on just a second. Okay, we've already had your formal presentation, but I do want to just acknowledge for anyone tuning in that this item was continued as part of the due diligence. I had asked the applicant to come back and discuss with the rear tenant and just kind of get insight on what is, any concerns. And so, Ms. Plummer, if there's anything you wish to add at this point and what your thoughts are.
Thank you, Ms. Kokinda. Just a quick re-summary and what the project's for. So the purpose of this hearing, I did give my presentation previously, but it is for an interior setback encroachment for the front building on the parcel, which is currently permitted as a single unit residence. And the request is to change the use of that building to a short-term rental. A portion of the building, as you can see, encroaches in the side yard setback. So you can see there's a 6-foot setback, and the distance to the interior property line is 3 feet and 10.5 inches. The project is located in the RMH zone, which does allow for a short-term rental or hotel type of use, but the modification is for specifically this bit of the building, which encroaches and therefore requires a modification for the change of use. And just as a refresher, the adjacent property does have a driveway bordering this property. On the other side is a mixed-use parcel with little corner store, as well as residential. And the property is constrained in a number of ways. One, it's a pretty narrow lot. It's also bordered by Mission Creek towards the back, so that does restrict some of the developable envelope on the property. And I do want to note that were the building to, say they were to demolish this and do new construction, because it is a non-residential use in the RMH zone, they would be required to have a double setback rather than the 6-foot setback, so a setback of 12 feet. And that would be challenging given the fact that there is the driveway access going to the garage. That pretty much summarizes just re-familiarizing yourself with the overall scope of work. And with that, I'll turn it over to the applicant to let us know what happened with the back unit.
Yeah, thank you. Whoops, excuse me. So we spoke to the back renter, and we actually procured a letter just so that if you wanted to see that, of his statement. And he said basically, I currently rent, this says, to whom it may concern, I currently rent the back house at 711 Bath Street in Santa Barbara. I am completely fine if the owner wants to vacation rental the front house. That will not bother me at all. Best regards, Juan Alvarez. And And then just to note, we thought it would also be important to talk to the neighbor to the right on the side of the modification. And Franco is the property owner's name. And he had the same comment that he was fine if we wanted to use the property in this way.
I also want to note, I didn't mention this in my stuff comments, but there's no proposed really exterior changes involved with this. There's no fencing or additional architectural design or some sort of buffering element between the two buildings on the site. Currently, this area, as you can see, it's just a concrete area. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. If that concludes everything, I'm going to reopen public comment for this item. If there's anyone in the audience wishing to speak, now is the time for 711 Bath Street, continued item. Ms. Good, do we have anyone via Zoom who wishes to speak?
On checking Zoom, I do not see any raised hands.
Okay, and I don't see anyone in the audience moving to speak, so I'm going to go ahead and close public comment. And so how long has Mr. Alvarez been a tenant there?
I'm not exactly sure. The rental company is the one who arranges there. I think he's been there at least for a month, would be my guess.
Month. Okay. Okay, and then, so prior to that, was that back unit open, or what was so I did a little more research, so I understand that in 2017, there were previous violations that were addressed under a separate building permit to address a lot of as-built work. So had it been rented between then and since Mr. Alvarez has been here?
Yeah, it's been rented off and on during that whole time. Yeah.
Okay. Just a couple other things. Since the last meeting, I did a little bit more research on the NOV, and I just want to claim my initial misunderstanding. I was really focused on the garage and some of the as-built work there. And I'm going to be honest, looking at these plans, and I know you had the notice of violation front and center on the front cover page for your plans, but the notice of violation wasn't included in the building permit record, and so I worked with enforcement staff to get that uploaded so that it was in the case file. So I've been able to do a little bit more research, and I'm just wondering, can you, looking at this site, I went out and did another site visit and noticed a couple of things. But that whole back unit has an incredible amount of as-built work to it. And so I'm just kind of curious why you didn't get your building permits for that.
Actually, everything done to the back unit was part of that original permit, and even the things that they're requiring us to change, the sub panel, and I think even the water heater, we had done that work previously. I think that was just missed in the original process. So
I guess
those,
I'm talking about
yeah.
the sewer line, or there's some kind of sewer
yeah,
line
that's
that
all.
is coming, that is above ground, that goes
Right.
through the length of the lot to that back unit, in the back of the back unit.
Yeah, the
along
only
that.
things that were done after that original permit was the conversion for the garage. That sewer line that you saw is actually existing before we even bought the property, so we didn't change that.
Okay.
So what, yeah,
I'm trying to think, I don't know if I saw that on the 2017 permit.
yeah, that was not changed, and that was pre-existing in that way,
verify.
yeah.
Okay, so a couple other things. So I did more research on the notice of violation. I went out for additional site visits to the rear. And I've got to be really honest with you. What I observed is that, again, there's there's a significant amount of work, of as-built work, that's been called out in this notice of violation on the rear unit. And the whole back area identifies parking spaces for essentially what looks like 4 short-term rental units. I mean, they're all named separately: the Rincon, the Ledbetter, the Butterfly, the Sandspit. So I guess I'm just kind of, there are keypads on each and every door, with, you can have locks. That whole area in the back seems to be a little bit mischaracterized, I'd call it, with gravel and with designated parking spaces for each of these identified units. And so I'm just having a hard time wrapping my brain around kind of this request and the specific, the fact that you're not proposing any kind of exterior site changes, and looking to, it's the least common denominator in creating this short-term rental for the front unit.
Yeah, so the idea behind this permit is to bring this to a position where we are able to operate it with the city's approval. And so that's why we're presenting it this way. We are long-term renting the back unit at this point. And we had originally had some more fencing in place that, and I can't remember why, in a previous correction, we were required to take it down. So because we had thought maybe we should do more in the way of, as I think you made the comment previously, make it a place where the back renter had more of his own space. So if there are recommendations as far as where you would like us to put fencing, we're totally open to that. But we had originally put a fence between the garage and the house. We put fencing around the courtyard, or not the courtyard, but the space between the rentals, thinking that would, in that concrete pad area right there, and the space to the below that concrete area, kind of separating that space out from the back unit. So we had made some efforts to separate them previously, and again, I apologize, I can't remember why, but in a previous correction, we were to take those out, so we did. So at this point, what we're presenting is what we would like to do, and it seems like a reasonable request.
So, again, just acknowledging, Ms. Plummer, go ahead.
I do want to add, so in terms of putting fencing here, there's no issue with that. It's up to the discretion of the staff hearing officer if you'd like to see some sort of physical condition, treatment of that area to separate the short-term rental from that back unit. I do want to say back here, while fencing here might be acceptable, they cannot do any improvements past the top of bank. So, returning it to natural ground cover might be the extent of what they could do, but they have some fencing back here which was required to be removed because it's not permitted and it's beyond the top of bank line. So they're required to remove it under this application. Thank you.
Thank you for clarifying. So I think, what else did I want to say? I want to just identify, when I originally did my first site visit, I was walking around mostly the kind of the sidewalk from the public right-of-way, looking at it, because kind of my purview is looking at this modification request of the interior setback. But because it's a change of use within the setback, I'm also looking at the whole site, how it's used, what are the implications, what are the challenges there. And I did not, because I didn't want to disturb a tenant, I did not go to the rear because it was like closer to 5 o'clock and I didn't want to freak anyone out, like who's walking back here. But again, with my site, like I went out twice for 2 additional site visits, and just am not really pleased with how this is all pulled together as a project. And I think that I appreciate your asking the tenant, but I just, in terms of, I have to be able to look at the findings and be able to make them. And looking at this particular project, I'm really struggling to make the assessment because, for one, as our ordinance does provide exceptions for conversion of residential to non-residential when there's a non-conforming interior setback. And it then identifies specific exceptions to that. So the community garden, the live-work unit, market garden, or neighborhood market. And they've got very specific conditions and standards. But I think that the overall design and the use, that there's no other exterior change. There's no, this didn't trigger any kind of design review as currently identified. It doesn't feel like there's any clear separation. It feels like a really large parking lot. There's no distinction between the concrete area, where you could park. So I just don't necessarily, I'm not seeing how this could really meet an appropriate improvement on the lot, or that this modification is necessary to secure an appropriate improvement on the lot. As one of the findings, I don't believe there's any kind of, that preventing an unreasonable hardship due to the physical characteristics. This is, yes, it's non-conforming, but again, I just, with the lack of other interventions and considerations between the units and the site in general, I'm not able to make that finding. D doesn't even count as a finding because it's not an affordable residential unit. And in terms of, there's already this particular development, just because hotel uses are allowed or short-term rental is allowed, that it's not necessarily, again, an appropriate improvement on the lot because of the fact that there's already an existing situation that's just as appropriate. So I concur with staff's agreement, or what they wrote in the staff report. Again, I might add that in addition to the denial findings, that it's not consistent with the purposes and intent of the setback, that the lack of exterior alterations and the lack of distinction between the two uses, and the creation of large kind of parking areas, that I'm not able to make the required findings at this time. And I can share that, again, I think a lot of it has to do with, I'm not seeing it, and I'm sorry that I wasn't able to see that the first time with my original site visit, and just seeing a lot when I went back out on site. But my action is appealable. You can, within 10 calendar days, anyone can appeal my decision to the Planning Commission, or any member of the Planning Commission could determine that want to suspend my decision and bring it up to the full Planning Commission for review.
Can I make comment based on what you've said?
Go ahead.
Yeah, so, and I might need to lean on Pilar a little bit, but as far as, you made a comment about parking. And again, that was something that we originally had presented differently that ended up changing because of the original corrections from the city. So, so if you have concerns about parking, I think there are reasons why it is the way it is. The reason why we're converting the garage back to a garage, and instead of trying to pursue is something else there. So again, we're making our best effort to accommodate the back renter that was going to get to use that garage. And so there are other parking because of where it is, the short-term rental has different parking requirements, and we're satisfying those. And so we feel like we've accommodated that concern. As far as you're wanting to see more in the way of separation or some kind of, I guess separation is the word that you're using. Again, we are totally willing to do something like that. Again, we were under the impression that we couldn't do that. That's why we took it out. So if there's some way that you could recommend that would make you feel better about it, then we're happy to provide that.
In the last meeting that we had, I mentioned I'm really trying to be open-minded here and look at this, and I think that the creation of the space and the site planning, and it just seems like there's I know that there are concerns from the neighbors as well, but, maybe not from the gentleman that you mentioned, the adjacent neighbor, and then the current tenant, but it didn't necessarily, it didn't look like there was any life back there, and it looked like there were 4 units and possibly 5. And, again, just the existing circumstances of the space make me think, what am I looking at here? And so I think that, again, there is nothing else provided. I think one other thing I wanted to mention in my research of the 2017 building case is that I'm not really clear of the design review aspect of it, because generally this project would require architectural board of review. And at that time, I think if anything, it was maybe just because it was probably going back to the original design. Either anything, it would just be administrative review, which is a staff level review. But at that, generally we look for, is there an approved site plan or, a landscape plan? And so there's just nothing here. It's the bare minimum. And I think that when you're requesting a use that changes the context of the neighborhood and kind of what the use is allowed, and it's not it doesn't meet any one of these particular exceptions, then I kind of want to see more to it, and that's why I am where I am today, in addition to having that concern. So I just want to put a pin in that. You have the right to appeal this decision, and within 10 calendar days, and if you so wish, and Ms. Plummer can share that information with you and how to do that. Okay, I do want to move on to the next item. And move on to item 4. It's 401 West Los Olivos. Ms. Gu, can you switch back to this? And I think you had to press one more. Okay, so this is an 18,628 square foot site. It's currently developed with an 18-unit, 2-story apartment complex and 2 accessory dwelling units. The project consists of a proposal to construct a 146 square foot trash enclosure on a 252 square foot concrete pad at the front of the property, adjacent to the existing surface parking lot. The discretionary applications under the jurisdiction of the staff hearing officer at the hearing are a front setback modification to allow the trash enclosure to be 2 feet 7 inches from the front lot line, an interior setback modification to allow the trash enclosure to be 1 foot 1 inch from the interior lot line. And this project does qualify for an exemption from further environmental review under Section 15303 of the California Environmental Quality Act guidelines, which allows for the construction of an accessory structure such as waste and recycling enclosure. Ms. Plummer, you're the planner for this one as well.
Thank you, Ms. Gokinda. So if we can switch to the plans, please. Great. Okay. So I thought I'd just start off with a photo. This is in terms of, what the overall request is for. It's really just a trash enclosure, so pretty minor structure on the site. Currently, the site does not have a trash enclosure, and they didn't, as far as their history goes, for their permit record. As you noted in the project description, the site is currently developed with an apartment complex. You can see that here. There is a surface parking area here, and this is the general location where the proposed trash enclosure is going. Adjacent to the site is this structure. The trash enclosure will be screened by this existing hedge that's there. I'm going to the site plan again. So this is that apartment structure. I do want to note that the project site is a corner lot, so it is subject to 2 front setbacks from West Los Olivos Street and Castillo Street. And you can see that as far as where buildings are located, parking, there's really not a lot of available locations to construct a compliant enclosure. There's the 18-unit apartment complex. This is really their outdoor space for all those units. It's a really small area here, but again, this is subject to a front setback as well. And that would also require a modification if you were to install an enclosure, just like is being requested here today for this location. Also recently, the applicant went through the city's process to construct 2 accessory dwelling units at the back of the property. Another constraint that is occurring on site is while they do have their surface parking, they're technically non-conforming to parking with 17 spaces rather than the required 18 spaces for the use. So there are some exceptions when it comes to constructing a compliant enclosure. One option is that you can remove up to 2 spaces in a parking lot in order to construct an enclosure, but that really isn't the best solution for the property. The applicant didn't want to pursue that because, again, they're already non-conforming. So by doing that, it would increase the non-conforming condition on the lot. And I do want to say I did get an email from one of the tenants a while back, just concerned whether the enclosure was going to be reducing parking further. So that will not be the case with this. They'll just be maintaining their 17 spaces. Another option that is available is to get a minor zoning exception, which would allow the enclosure to be located in the interior setback. But the stipulation is that you need to be set back 10 feet from the front lot line. Again, you can see they'd still have to impinge on the existing parking, which wouldn't really be an improvement. The structure, whether they're proposing it, is 1 foot to 1 inch from the interior lot line and is 2 feet 7 inches from the front lot line. It's a pretty low profile structure. I'll go to the elevation drawings for that in a minute, on a concrete pad, but as designed, it's not intended to conflict with the visibility triangle off the driveway. It's also in a good location to be serviced by the city U-hauler. And as I noted, there's a pretty substantial hedge on the adjacent property, which will provide some buffering to the adjacent building. And just so we can see the structure itself, it's pretty simple. Woodgate was reviewed by the Architectural Board of Review, I want to say late fall 2023, and they thought it was an appropriate improvement on the law in terms of aesthetics and design. And again, it's to construct an enclosure where there isn't one now. Right now, it's just, I believe the dumpsters or carts are just out, and so this will definitely clean up that condition. That really concludes my comments. I'll turn it over to the applicant, Mr. Gorn, if he has anything to add.
Thank you, Ms. Plummer.
Yeah, good morning, Ms. Kukinda. I'm Jarrett Gorn from Vanguard Planning, and Ms. Plummer gave a really thorough presentation. I can't add a whole lot to it. We don't want to lose any more parking on there, and we've got this existing hedge along the front. We wanted to leave enough room along that front setback that we could always maintain some sort of planting in there for screening, and the enclosure is attractive enough even without screening in my opinion, it's a pretty low profile thing, and it's going to provide adequate recycling and trash for this project for the first time ever. They've just got carts sitting out there, and if you'd seen the archive plans for this, you pull up the site plan real quick. So the original trash enclosure was on the archive plans. They showed it here, which is the width of one trash container. There'd be no way to get to it, and there's a car parked in front of it. So we like it here. Marburg can get to it easily. All the tenants can get to it easily, and so we think it's an appropriate improvement on a lot.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gorin. I'm going to open it up to public comment. I can confirm that I didn't receive any written correspondence on this item. Ms. Gu, do we have anyone attending via Zoom who wishes to speak on 401 West Los Olivos Street?
I'm checking on Zoom. I do not see any raised hands.
Okay, and no one in the audience wishing to speak, so I'll close public comment. So I did go out on site, and I thought it was rather serendipitous that as I was there, I saw a tenant dragging a trash bag and throwing it over, and the one kind of wheeled the only trash can on site that was piled high like a mountain, and I thought, well, how apropos. And that person was kind of coming from the front, kind of along the West Olivos side. So I assume that there's different, people are coming from all different areas to be able to access the trash. So when I went out on site, I thought that in general, I appreciate the different design considerations. This is a much more obscure location, even though it's in the front and interior setback. Clearly, there's a front interior setback, or two front setbacks along the Los Olivos, what is it? What's the Castillo? Thank you. Los Olivos Castillo, but that would be, kind of a terrible design decision to be right out in front. I think I appreciate, I'm sure the tenants appreciate not losing any additional parking, especially with the additions of the accessory dwelling units. Whenever we see these sites, trash is always tricky. It always seems to be, triggering modification requests when you've got these non-conforming apartment buildings that don't meet our trash and recycling. I do have a question, Mr. Gorin, about the door, because as it's designed, if that swings out, my biggest concern for this design is kind of, a tenant taking their trash out at night, opening the door and just leaving it open. So I know that there's a little bit of buffer, that it might not necessarily block the driveway, but I'm just kind of curious what the rationale was to completely block it off, or yes, any considerations there?
Yeah, Ms. Kokinda, I mean, it's a function of geometry. Like, they can't swing inwards because then they
Oh,
would-
right. No. I'm not looking to swing inwards. I'm just thinking of, of being an issue with visibility for coming in and out of the driveway.
I think what we would do...
Or even having a door to begin with, or like bringing it down. Like, I'm just kind of, again, just from a safety standpoint, and not to like throw any tenant under the bus, but just kind of a laziness, or again, if I'm doing something at night and I'm scared of spiders, I don't want to touch any handles. I don't want to I just want to run, throw it in, and then get out of there. How is this, is there any kind of, it's all manual, I assume. There's no, no automation to this particular door of any kind. So just would love your thoughts on that, and thinking about the safety and
the
annoyance.
best we're going to be able to do for that would be to put some sort of signage on there to please close the door, and put reflectors of some kind on those doors so that if somebody pulls in or is pulling into the driveway, they would see it more obviously. You can see that only that door on the right here would actually swing into the visibility
Right.
triangle at all.
Right.
And by the time it does, probably only I don't know, 4 feet of it would actually be in that triangle itself. So I think these will be pretty visible to people. Most people going in to the trash enclosure are only going to open one of the 2 doors. And so what we could do to make that, so typically you'll have one door which has sort of a rod which you pull up
Yep.
that goes into a hole in the ground, and then the other one has the handle on it, which is the primary access door. So we could make the door on the left here be the one that people use to open and close all the time, and then the other one could be the one with that pull-up rod that Marburg uses if they're opening it up to take a dumpster out of there. I think that'd probably be the best way to handle that.
I think that's a great solution and supportive of that. So, okay, well, that was my only concern. Again, I appreciate the design considerations and walking me through. I can approve both the front setback modification and that it's consistent with the purposes of this ordinance, and in the fact that you're finally getting a compliant waste and recycling area and addressing it in kind of an obscure location. It's not losing parking. You're trying to maximize the situation and also utilize the existing hedge to kind of continue to buffer that area. And I agree with Ms. Plummer's write-up in the staff report, and can also approve the interior setback modification, and that it's consistent with the purpose of, same thing, that we've got compliant waste and recycling for all the things that I just mentioned, and can confirm that this project is exempt from further environmental review, and would like to request as part of the building permit, or as part of the final design, that that one change be made, so that it's, what would we call that? How do
I would say, like, we'll call the one on the left the primary access gate.
Okay. All right.
So say the gate on the left of the trash enclosure, or I don't know, Santa Barbara directions are always.
I know, I don't want to do north, south.
I've been doing this for
I
30
think-
years and I
yeah,
still
we're gonna say
don't know.
left. We're going to say the left door. I think the intention is that so it doesn't swing open and cause any kind of, that it's not as likely to cause an issue with access.
Let's say that the door furthest from the front
Yes.
property line, the front property line should be the primary access gate.
All right. And I will, it's a simple condition, but I think you understand, and I'll add that, and just that will kind of cover this. But again, my action is appealable within 10 calendar days, and any member of the Planning Commission could suspend my decision. But good luck on your project, and I also heard that they need a utility pole across the street, so good luck with that as well.
That's going pretty well, actually. But
Good.
thank you.
And that concludes the staff hearing officer meeting for February 7th, 2024. Thank you.